The cold metal scraped my fingertips before I even understood what I was touching, and when I dragged that tiny black device into the morning light, the air around me seemed to freeze. My driveway, usually so familiar and harmless, suddenly felt like a stage I'd wandered onto without knowing the script. My heart was pounding hard enough that I could hear it in my ears, drowning out everything else. If you've ever trusted the wrong person, subscribe and tell me where you're listening from, because moments like this change you. Holding that tracker, I felt something inside me tilt, as if the ground itself shifted beneath my feet. I didn't know it yet, but that was the moment my entire world began to split open. Let me show you how it all began. I found the tracker wedged beneath the frame of my car on a cold morning when I was already running behind. For a moment, I just stared at it, trying to convince myself it was something harmless. But the weight that settled in my chest told me otherwise. I remember kneeling there on the driveway, my breath catching as a pulse of fear moved through me. Someone had put it there. Someone who knew exactly where I would be. I should probably tell you who I am, though at that moment I barely recognized myself. My name felt distant, like it belonged to a woman who used to believe her life was predictable and safe. Seeing that device shattered any illusion I had left about the boundaries of my world. This wasn't random. It wasn't accidental. It felt personal in a way that made my stomach tighten. I kept turning over the same question in my mind. Who would want to follow me? And why did the first faces that flashed through my thoughts belong to people I trusted? That realization cut deeper than the fear itself. As I held that small piece of plastic and metal, I knew I needed to understand how everything had spiraled into this. And to explain that, I have to start at the beginning. After finding that tracker, I felt myself pulled back into the quiet spaces of my own life, almost as if I needed to remember who I was before fear took hold. I spent years rebuilding myself after losing my husband. His passing reshaped everything about my world, stripping life down to its bare edges. For a long time, I moved through my days in slow motion, trying to understand how to live without the person who had anchored me. But eventually, routines formed. Small habits became steady ground. I learned how to enjoy my mornings again, how to manage the house on my own, how to take care of myself without feeling guilty for being alive. Independence didn't come from strength at first. It grew from necessity, then slowly became something I cherished. I tried to stay open, though I didn't want grief to harden me. I wanted to believe that trusting people was still safe, that kindness could still be met with kindness. Maybe that softness made me overlook things I shouldn't have. Maybe I wanted stability so badly that I ignored early warnings. What I do know is that my life felt steady again, quiet, predictable, almost peaceful. And then someone new stepped into that calm, smiling in a way that made me believe my daughter had finally found happiness. I had no idea how wrong I was. When my daughter first brought Evan into our lives, I remember feeling a quiet rush of relief. He carried himself with an easy confidence, the kind that made you believe he had everything under control. He held doors open, offered to help with groceries, and spoke about the future in a way that made my daughter glow. After everything we had been through as a family, seeing her smile like that softened something in me. I wanted so badly to believe she had found someone who would cherish her. I let myself trust him, maybe more than I should have. He made a point of checking in on me, asking if I needed help around the house, offering thoughtful gestures that felt genuine at the time. It was comforting to think my daughter had chosen someone attentive and grounded. I even caught myself feeling grateful for the stability he seemed to bring into her life. But looking back, there were small moments that didn't quite sit right. Times when his charm felt a little rehearsed, or when he seemed to know things I didn't remember sharing. I brushed those feelings aside, convincing myself they were just remnants of my cautiousness after years of learning how to stand on my own again. Still, a faint discomfort lingered beneath the warmth, a quiet whisper I kept ignoring. I didn't realize then how dramatically his presence would shift the ground beneath my feet. If I had listened to that early unease, maybe I would have noticed the truth sooner, the truth I would eventually uncover in the most unsettling way. It happened during the kind of ordinary moment that should have meant nothing. I had dropped my bag in the driveway and bent down to grab it, annoyed at myself for being clumsy. But as I reached under the car, my hand brushed against something smooth and cold that didn't belong there. When I pulled it into the light, my breath stopped. A tracker. Small, dark, and deliberate. I remember feeling the world narrow around me, as if every sound had been sucked out of the air. Shock hit first, sharp and disorienting. Then my mind began racing backward through every recent interaction, every strange comment, every moment that had felt just a little too calculated. I thought about how Evan always seemed to know when I was home, how he'd casually mention places I'd been, how he'd ask questions that felt harmless at the time. All of it fell into place with a sickening clarity. My hands were trembling, but beneath the fear there was something deeper, betrayal that burned hot and cold at the same time. Someone had violated the one space I thought I still controlled. Someone close enough to touch my life without resistance. As I stood there holding that device, the panic slowly gave way to something steadier. I needed answers. I needed to know exactly who had been watching me and why. And if I was going to find the truth, I would have to start by testing it myself. At first, all I could feel was panic pulsing through my body. But once I sat down at my kitchen table with that tracker in my hands, something inside me steadied. Fear sharpened into clarity. I studied every inch of the device, noticing the magnet, the casing, the tiny indicator light. A quick search told me exactly what it was and how it worked. There was no denying it anymore. Someone wanted to know where I was at all times. The realization chilled me, but it also pushed me into motion. If someone was following me, then I needed to know who. I wasn't about to sit in my house waiting for whatever came next. I grabbed my keys and drove to a truck stop a few towns over, my mind racing the entire way. The air smelled like diesel and dust as I walked between rows of idling semis. My hands shook when I crouched beside one and pressed the tracker onto its metal frame, but I did it anyway. On the drive home, I forced myself to breathe evenly, to act as if my day was ordinary. I cleaned the kitchen, folded laundry, kept the evening quiet, but every sound felt amplified, every shadow stretched too long. By the time I went to bed, there was a tightness in my chest I couldn't shake. I didn't know what the morning would bring, only that it would bring something. I woke just after sunrise, the house still wrapped in that heavy quiet that settles before the day fully begins. For a few seconds, I forgot about the tracker, and then the memory came rushing back, tightening my stomach. When the phone rang, the sound cut through the stillness so sharply that my heart jumped. I didn't recognize the number, but something in me knew I had to answer. The moment I heard the voice on the other end, a coldness spread through my body. I could feel myself gripping the edge of the mattress, bracing without knowing why. They told me a man had been arrested out of state, a man carrying my photograph, my address, and notes about my routines. I remember feeling my pulse in my throat, each beat louder than the next. Then came the part that hollowed me out. The man claimed he had been hired. He refused to give a full name, only initials, E. Those two letters hit me harder than anything else. My mind went blank and sharp all at once. Evan. My daughter's fiancé, the man who sat at my dinner table, the man I had welcomed into my home. I felt myself fold inward, as if my body were trying to shield me from the truth. But there was no protection left. Everything I feared was real, and the threat wasn't distant. It was personal, intentional, and close. When the call ended, I sat there in the silence, shaking. Fear slowly hardened into something heavier, something that demanded answers. If Evan was behind this, then I needed to know who he truly was, and I needed to know now. In the hours after that call, I moved through my house in a kind of daze, touching countertops, rearranging mail, anything to keep my hands busy while my mind fractured under the weight of what I now knew. Fear lingered, but beneath it burned a clearer emotion. I needed answers, and I needed them without alerting anyone, not even my daughter. I started reaching out to the few people in my life I trusted with something this heavy. A financial advisor I had known for years, an attorney who had guided me after my husband passed, a retired investigator who had once helped our neighborhood watch. I didn't share every detail, only enough for them to understand the urgency. And piece by piece, a picture of Evan began to surface, each detail darker than the last. There were gambling debts scattered across several states, old accounts under different versions of his name, patterns of manipulation that stretched back farther than I wanted to imagine. And then came the discovery that made my stomach drop. Money missing from my accounts. Small amounts at first, then larger withdrawals disguised among legitimate expenses. By the time I added it all together, the number was undeniable. $37,000 gone. Shame washed over me, hot, suffocating. I couldn't understand how I had let someone get that close, how I had invited danger into my home with a smile. Grief followed quickly. The grief of realizing my daughter's future had been built on a lie. But after the grief came anger, steady and grounding. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table, the house dim except for the light above me, and let the full truth sink in. I knew what had to happen next. I had to confront him, and I had to protect my daughter from the man she thought she loved. I spent the afternoon preparing dinner the same way I had done countless times before, but everything felt heavier, almost staged. Every movement was deliberate, every breath slow and measured. I needed to appear calm, even though my mind kept replaying every discovery from the past few days. By the time my daughter and Evan walked through the door, I had settled into a brittle stillness, holding myself together with sheer will. Watching them sit at my table felt surreal. My daughter's smile carried a softness that broke my heart, and Evan wore that practiced charm I now recognized as nothing more than a mask. I studied every flicker of his expression, every calculated gesture, and felt a cold certainty settle deeper inside me. I couldn't protect her if I stayed silent. When I finally chose to reveal what I knew, it felt like stepping off a cliff. I watched the light drain from my daughter's eyes as understanding hit her, watched her entire future collapse in an instant. Grief and disbelief twisted across her face, and I felt something inside me crack with her. Evan reacted differently. The moment the weight of the truth pinned him, I saw panic surge through him. He pushed back from the table, eyes darting to the door, ready to run. But the officers I had called earlier were already waiting. The sound of them entering the house felt distant, almost muted, as they moved toward him. Then everything stopped. My daughter sobbing, Evan being taken away, the house falling into an unnatural quiet. When the door finally closed behind the officers, I stood alone in the stillness, trembling, knowing the hardest part wasn't over yet. The aftermath was only beginning. The house felt unbearably quiet after the officers left. My daughter sat beside me on the couch, folded in on herself, her eyes swollen from crying. I wrapped my arms around her, feeling her shake against me. There was nothing I could say to erase the pain, so I just held her, letting her lean into me the way she did when she was little. Protecting her was the only thing that made sense in that moment. As the night stretched on, exhaustion settled deep in my bones. Shock and relief tangled together in a way that left me unsteady. Part of me still couldn't believe how close danger had been. Another part was grateful that we were safe, grateful that the truth surfaced before anything worse happened. Over the next few days, we moved slowly. My daughter began therapy, and I focused on small routines that helped me feel grounded again. I changed passwords, reviewed finances, and reshaped the boundaries around my life. Healing didn't come quickly, but I could feel the first signs of strength returning, like a faint warmth after a long winter. Still, something lingered, a sense that there was one more piece of this story waiting for me. And I was right. A few weeks after the dust settled, I received a call from my attorney that brought the final piece of this ordeal into focus. While reviewing documents connected to Evan, they discovered he had attempted to alter paperwork related to my husband's old life insurance account. He hadn't succeeded, but the attempt alone was enough to send a fresh chill through me. It confirmed what I already knew in my gut. His intentions had stretched far beyond what we first uncovered. Strangely, that last twist didn't break me. It clarified things. It reminded me how important it is to guard my own life, my home, and my peace with more intention than I had before. I had spent years learning how to stand again after losing my husband, and this ordeal showed me that strength isn't something you earn once. It's something you keep choosing, even when you're tired. I am grateful we uncovered the truth in time. Grateful my daughter is healing. Grateful I found the courage to listen to the voice inside me that refused to stay quiet. If you've ever faced something that shook your sense of safety or trust, I hope my story helps you feel less alone. And if you're willing, share your experience with me. I read every word,